call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum. If you will please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, in front of you, you have the minutes from the previous meeting. You'll take a look at them from August 19th. You'll take a look at them, see if there are any additions and or deletions. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Properly seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We are going to move one thing up from the back page, number 5, public comment period, to the beginning of the process. Is there anyone here that would like to make any public comments related to the agenda only? If you're going to speak on it, you wouldn't come forward, but any public comments to anything. Seeing none, we move on. This time we're going to the Historic Zoning Commission and Common Design Review Board cases. Case number, we will open the public hearings for case HG 4, 2024. If you'd like to speak, and put your, Brett. Well, I'll turn over to Brett. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I like it. I like it. Just a reminder, since we are in the historic portion of the meeting, only our historic zoning members can vote on and speak from the floor on the next two items. So that being said, first case is HG 4, 2024. It's the application of Catherine D. Barton with the agent of Daniel Harding. Reason for the request is addition of a single-story garage to replace existing structure located at the back of the property. All siding and roof colors to match the existing house trim for property located at 120 McClear Street. This property does sit in the Emerald Hill Historic District, and it is highlighted in blue on the screen. Emerald Hill consists of a mix of pre-Civil War homes, apartment buildings, a private school, bungalows, and other homes in a variety of styles. It is also home to the First Plan subdivision in Clarksville. This is the primary structure at 120 McClear Street. Our 2020 historic survey describes the structure as a 1.5-story Tudor Revival influenced dwelling from circa 1940. The dwelling has a brick foundation, stretcher bond brick exterior, and side gable roof of asphalt shingles. The facade on the south has a projecting central enclosed entrance bay with an asymmetrical gable front roof. The main entrance has an original wood panel door with 4 vertical lights. Above the door is a concrete arch panel. Above the panel is a segmental arch with soldier course brick. The entrance is bordered with stacked bond brick. Adjacent to the entrance, there are decorative random stone insets. The entrance bay has a poured concrete stoop with wrought iron railings and brick steps and is flanked by original 8/8 wood sash windows with soldier course lintels and header brick seals. There is a similar window and treatment on the east elevation as well as the secondary entrance. The west elevation has a circa 1980 single light glass and wood door. This next view, and as always, I should have thanked Mr. David Smith from the beginning for the images that you will see here today, shows the structure behind the house at 120 that is proposed to be tore down and replaced, as I mentioned, by the new garage. One more shot from overhead. You can see the old kind of dilapidated structure behind it. Then one more from almost looking straight down. The new structure I'll point out from this view will be right off the current driveway, which can be seen from the site plan here. Again, here is the structure at 120, and then the 25 by 25 garage, which will sit behind it off the drive. And this is an example of what that structure will look like. Again, the size is 25 by 25. It will be hardy board material on the outside and desert and taupe color, which will match the house trim. Staff comments, which come from the Emerald Hill Design Guidelines. Design any new garages or outbuildings to be compatible with the style of the major buildings on site. And new garages or outbuildings generally should be located to the rear of the main house, and scale of the addition should not overpower the existing house or the size of the existing lot. And I will answer any questions if there are any. One more thing real quick. As with all historic zoning cases, adjoining property owners were notified and received no comment as of today.
Thank you, Rick. Any comments for the staff?
So
Questions?
the two driveways you see kind of in the aerial photo and the two cars are both at this house?
The driveway right here to the left of 120 is to the neighboring property.
Okay, but that's the structure that's getting told.
I'm Dan Harding. It's actually a shared driveway to the, there were actually two garages that were originally located back there, and that was a shared driveway between the two houses. The existing standing structure right now is that original garage.
So just.
You'll have a chance to speak later.
The
Just wait.
structure that's in this photo is the one being replaced.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's, because when I didn't catch that in the, when you sent the
I got
packet
you.
out, I saw the two driveways, I said, oh, they're just building one like that. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Any other questions for the staff?
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So this, new garage is gonna replace the old garage. Are they about the same size, or is it a bit bigger? Is it small in size? What's the,
I think the new one's a little bigger, but I'll defer to Mr. Harding.
That is.
Well, you'll have a
Yeah.
chance to speak later, sir.
it's a little bigger, okay.
Any other questions for the staff? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing for HC-4-2024. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in favor of it? Please come forward and state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Dan Harding, and I currently reside at 120 McClure Street. The original property, as I said earlier, had this garage that is on the backside. It is a shared driveway. It makes it very difficult for the folks with the adjoining property because it's a B&B. So when they want to have people parking off the street, they're basically parking in the driveway area. So it makes it a little difficult. That's one reason we would prefer to go back to the back of the property and construct a garage to the right-hand side of the property on the picture, so that way we can avoid that conflict and make sure that we take care of being able to work well together as a good neighbor, and also try to maintain the historical flavor of the community by not putting in something that's atrocious or a huge structure. It will be, it is smaller than the existing house, and in fact, we wanted to keep it to a single story, and that type of thing was to try to keep in keeping with that.
So it's small.
Any other questions that somebody might have?
Anybody like to ask some questions?
I think you answered. So you say this new garage is gonna be smaller, is that correct?
It's gonna be smaller. It's make sure we clarify that for you. It's 25 by 25. The house is actually about 35, 36 by 36, and it's a story and a half, and this would be a single-story garage facility.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there any other person that wishes to speak in favor of HZ-4-2024? In favor, anybody else? Seeing none, is there anybody that wishes to speak in opposition to HZ-4-2024? Anybody in opposition? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing at this time.
Motion for approval?
Motion's been made for approval.
Second.
Properly seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All those, and remember, this is only historical. They can vote on this. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. Now we'll go into the next case, DDR 14-2024.
While we're still in the historic portion, we'll turn it over to the Preservation Coalition for the Downtown Historic Overlay Map.
It's changing, skipping around on me.
All right. So again, historical board members, you'll remember last month we had a presentation by Ms. Rudolph, and there was some confusion at the time of what a map that was produced or not. I will call call your attention to the front flap of your packet. You should have a folded up map. We'll refer to this map first. And Mr. Chairman, without stealing Ms. Rudolph's thunder or anyone else with her group, I would like to welcome them up for their comments on the map that they produced to us and to continue the discussion from last month about creating a additional downtown historic overlay.
After voting on this today.
Yes.
Where's, would,
So we're just gonna vote on the option. Just
not the,
to raise to the plan.
not the,
Good afternoon. I'm looking at the map up there compared to the one that I have. If you don't mind, may I step over a little bit closer to
Yeah,
see
yeah.
that?
Don't
Can
worry
you-
about that yet. We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Can you tell me
Because
who's
the map that
speaking?
I pres-
Can you,
The map that I had presented,
can you tell us your name, ma'am?
I'm sorry,
Uh-huh,
I'm Jennifer Rudolph.
thank you.
I'm a member of a small group named Montgomery County Preservation Coalition. We initially had spoken about the map that you all had that was done in the 1976, and it designated a historic architectural district in downtown. The map that I have supplied is outlined in blue, which is that area that represents the historic architectural district, but it does not have an H1 overlay. I feel like that was maybe something back in 1976 that just got left out, maybe by accident, maybe by not careful consideration. The areas in the pink purple do have the H1 overlay designation. You can see that Public Square, which actually meets up with the North 3rd Street area of the historic architectural district, and then the area on Main Street that meets up with the architectural historic district. So what we are proposing is the outline in blue that was the historic architecture be placed under an H1 overlay. In doing more thought and study on this particular map and of the downtown area, with all the growth that's going on, we see a need to try to contain a nice perimeter around our historic downtown to make it aesthetically encompassing with the older buildings and homes of downtown. So we have a proposal that is outlined in green on the map. Certainly, there are numerous buildings and homes in that area that are of historic nature. They are over 50 years old, and they have properties next to them that already are on the National Historic Register, and we would like to avoid someone coming, say, beside them and encroaching on their property. So we would like consideration of the green. Again, this is for the benefit of downtown. We have a lot of things going on. We just don't want to get down the road and start losing some of these properties or having something come in next to a property that is of historic nature. So we feel like an H1 is appropriate to look at and to consider.
When you say the green, you're talking about the green outline on this map?
Yes, sir.
Okay, 'cause we have another green map.
I have an outline in blue and an outline in green. The outline in blue represents, as I said, the original 1976 survey that deemed that architecturally historic. So certainly that definitely needs to be given great consideration to put an H1 over. But in looking, again, we thought that the green area constitutes a thought of maybe including that in an H1.
I have a question.
Hold on, before we have a question. Also, remember on this, we'll be voting on this at the end. It's a historical vote, and Mr. Tyndall will explain more, but there's gonna be 3 different options for that, to go in there. So, all right, go ahead. Wanda, you have a question?
Ma'am, are these properties that you have in green personally owned or city or county owned? That you want them to be put in the H1 outlay, are they personally owned or city or Montgomery County owned? Who owns?
Well, I think you would find in the green, which is,
That's what I'm talking about. That's
right,
what
which
I'm
I would say would be second for consideration. Blue, definitely consideration, but green is a perspective study for consideration. But in the green area, there are city, there are county, there are private owned.
Have you talked to the owners about this? before
No,
you
ma'am,
make
not
this?
yet. What we are hoping is that you all will see merit in looking at this and maybe passing it to the Regional Planning Commission for their look at it as well. So,
Well,
no, ma'am, we have not gone
Okay.
to that length yet. We felt like it was a little premature until we could speak with you all.
Well, I would be afraid to vote on this without the owners, property owners being notified that we're trying to do this, because we got a lot of pushback last time about some historical property wanted to be added in. And so I don't want to overstep my boundaries and just go ahead and putting somebody's property in this H1 if they're not wanting to do so.
Yes, ma'am. The way that I understand the process, and Mr. Tyndall can correct me if I misspeak, the consideration would start here, just to look at it further, if it has merit, to look at it further, and then send it to the RPC board. And they, I understand, would have the opportunity to look at it to see if it has merit, and property owners be contacted. And then I understand if they agree, then it must go to the city council, and at that point, the property owners would be notified. So it's not a done deal at this step. It has several steps. And again, I think Mr. Tyndall could correct me or speak further on that.
Well, I would just think that we need to get the property owners involved in this before we make a decision on this ourselves, because that's the way it usually goes. I didn't know the process has changed, so this is new to me.
I think it's a good time for me to interject here.
Please do.
Okay, so we wanted the Historic Preservation Coalition to come with an idea first, and then Brent and I, once we're done with Ms. Rudolph here and any other questions for her, we will present 3 different options to you all today for consideration. Now, you may also amend those options. We want the ultimate goal today would be for the Regional Historic Zoning Commission to elevate to the Planning Commission a request of one of these maps or a version of one of the maps we'll share with you in a minute. At that point, the Planning Commission has an opportunity to consider whether or not they want to initiate a zoning change on that portion of the properties. There's only 2 ways it can happen. It can either happen at the Planning Commission or at the City Council, are the only 2 places that can initiate a zoning ordinance change, which is what this would be. At that point, if the Planning Commission does start with it, which they wouldn't, even if you passed it today, they won't get it till next month, then we will start the process of notifying the public. The reason we didn't do that yet is because we have several options in front of you, and I don't want to notify someone who may not be involved or forget to notify someone who might be involved. So today is about the concept and starting the process. It'll go to the Planning Commission. It will come back here in likely 2 months period of time for a formal hearing. At that point, everyone will have been notified in and around whatever area we're talking about. Regional Historic makes a recommendation to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission then makes a recommendation to City Council. City Council will then hear it like a normal zoning case. So you have to start the process, and really we're at the ground floor today talking about where to start from, trying to figure out that starting block. So I think that helps explain the process, and we use Ms. Rudolph's map as a starting off point for some different ideas as we looked at the survey both our most recent survey in 2020 and the historic survey from the 70s about how this district could be expanded.
Thank you, Mr. Tindall.
I still think that the people need to be notified. I'm not gonna go with that. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Tyndall, but when you leave people out of doing something in this city, it causes a lot of uproar. And I think that every property owner needs to be notified that we are planning to do this.
That we will
I
be-
just
they'll be involved.
don't think we need to go ahead and vote and say, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and accept this and we're gonna get started on this. I just still think that these property owners need to be notified, and that's my stance, and that's what I stick with. Thank you.
And it's my understanding that property owners will be notified once we
But after
pick
the
out
fact.
which option, A, B, or C, that we do.
I understand, if I may, I understand that if we do, at this level, decide that it has merit to move it up, then certainly the property owners would be involved. I agree with Mr. Tyndall. We're talking about 2 or 3 different options just to look at. And if it gets moved up to the RPC, certainly then the public that owns property in this would be notified, and they would have rights to speak on opposing or approving their feelings. But again, this is just a ground level, start the
I
process type
understand
of.
it's a ground
Yes, ma'am.
level. I understand that. That's not what I'm saying.
Any other questions for Ms. Rudolph?
Like I said, all
Any other
property,
questions?
let me finish. All property owners need to be notified before we do this. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you
Ms.
very
Donna
much,
Turner.
like I said, just for consideration of going forward.
All right, this time, Mr. Tyndall.
So, as I had mentioned briefly just a moment ago, when we received this map from Ms. You can have a seat.
Thank you.
We'll take it from here. We looked at both the most recent survey around the suggestion that was discussed last month, as well as this map, and came up with 3 different options. They're in the front of your book, A, B, and C. And for us, you know, the green line that was proposed on the map presented right before us, you know, that's a lot of area. And I'll remind the board that we also do have the downtown urban design overlay that covers anything that's not in the historic district. So we still do have a certain level of protection and review of certain properties in the downtown, just not quite the level of the historic properties that we're showing you today. And options A, B, and C, as you can imagine, it steps from the smallest to the largest area of maps. And if you hold it, I'll try to walk you through it. As mentioned in this original map, everything in purple already is under a historic overlay. So this does not include those areas. Option A includes City Hall of the city. It also includes, we call it Horse Feathers, or there's a commercial building just south of Franklin Street. It includes all buildings that front on Franklin Street between First Street and Second Street, as well as Second to Third, which would be the Transit Center, Knights of Pythias building, as well as the more modern city or county courthouse. It includes the historic county courthouse. It includes the historic portion of the Customs House Museum, and then it cuts across the block to include the Madison Street Methodist Church also there. So that's what option A looks like. Option B builds on that just slightly by including the properties aforementioned and those on the other side of Strawberry Alley between Main Street and Strawberry Alley and First and Second Street. It also includes on that map the block that is south of Commerce Street between Second and Third to include the Royal York building, which is a historic building per our most recent historic study. And then option C builds on the option B to include a few other properties, to include the more modern portion of the Customs House Museum, as well as the properties from Hyder Street down to the Bolin Hughes building on that 5th Street, right? So there's three different options in front of you. Staff believes option A or B is the most logical at this point. It follows both the 1979 study as well as the 2020 study for the most historic buildings in the core of downtown. And then building on it in the future, option C might be something a little further down the line. If this passes, you could look at adding another block or two along Madison Street where there are, such as the First Baptist Church, the historic portion which we left standing last month, and some of the other buildings out there. So what we're looking for from the Regional Historic Zoning Commission today is a vote and a recommendation to the Planning Commission to take up one of these options, or if you have an opinion, say take option A but add this property, or option B and remove this property. We're also willing to listen to those ideas, but we think we've given you three solid options to debate and consider raising to the Planning Commission. We would bring this to the Planning Commission in October, and if they vote to initiate it, that's when all the bells and whistles and the public notification and the ordinance starts at that point. So this is about voting to recommend it and request the Planning Commission to take it under consideration.
Is there any questions for Mr. Tindall? Yes, sir.
Were either of the other two historic churches looked at as far as the Lutheran, Episcopal and the Presbyterian Church?
They are not. No.
They're under the downtown district overlay, but they're not in the H1.
They're under the
The
downtown urban
Presbyterian
design.
church is,
Right, but
it's
that's
in the
not
main
your
street.
It's not in the
Yeah.
H1.
Presbyterian churches, yeah.
and Trinity Episcopal is on the National Register currently.
Yes, so they're both protected.
So we attempted to make a cohesive district that can be bound by property lines or roads instead of jumping over.
Sure.
We do believe there is merit to Third Street and the Newts building in the future,
is
but
that
we
the
need to
one-
get there in the
Is
future.
that the one on the corner?
That's the one on the
Yes.
corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my next, that was part B of the question, was the ones on the opposite of those two.
Yeah.
My final question is, what does the H1 overlay do
Entail.
to a modern constructed building like the Court Center?
Sure. Well, the government doesn't necessarily have to follow their own rules, so it become more of an advisement at that point of how you should build something. But if you want that question from a private perspective, I'd ask Brent to chime in on the key 2 or 3 differences between the downtown urban design overlay versus the historic overlay. They're very similar. There's just a little bit more teeth on the historic district, and it's the smaller board, which represents, if you look at the membership of this board, there's an architect, a historian, there is a certain membership that makes up the historic commission versus the larger common design review board.
Jeff did a good job answering that. The only thing I'll add is, if this district were to pass, I think ultimately it says that, it went through 3 bodies. And those 3 bodies all found it significant enough for preservation. So I think that's kind of the ultimate thing we point to, and then hopefully protect new buildings as they come in to blend nicely with the historic district. So.
Any other questions for Mr. Tindall?
The only difference I see is between the option B and option C is First Baptist Church, the newer part of the museum, First Baptist Church, and the Bolton House. That's it,
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
And I think it's the building used for Clarksville Youth Enrichment on the corner down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, the Bowling Hughes House, is it on, it's not on the National Historic
It
Register?
is.
It is?
It is not. Okay.
Right, so I hate to leave that off.
Understand. That's why we gave you some options.
Yeah, okay.
I got a question.
Anybody else have any questions?
Mr.
On that?
I want to Mr. Tindall.
Okay, related to this, not on the, okay, go
What you
ahead.
think it's related to?
You have the.
Your hair or something? Come
No,
on.
you have
Come on,
this in
don't
your
be
hand.
funny.
No.
Okay, Mr. Tyndall, so this ordinance has not been brought before us. This is the ordinance you bringing before us. Is that correct?
We're speaking to the maps to start
I know,
a.
but what is this?
We'll get to that
We'll
later.
get to that.
Okay,
That's on our agenda.
okay.
was trying to explain that.
Your hair.
Talk to me about my hair.
Yeah, I mean, you gonna ask me a stupid question, I'm gonna ask you, I'm gonna ask.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Tindall?
So what we'd be looking for now is from the Regional Historic membership, a motion on one of these as is or as amended to bring forward to the Planning Commission.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt B with an amendment to it to add in the Bowling Hughes house.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? It dies for a lack of second. Is there any other motions? What do you want to do?
I make a motion for C, to accept C.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
And properly seconded. Is there any other discussion? Voting on option C. Seeing there's no discussion, I assume you're ready to vote. All those in favor of option C, and again, this is a historic vote only, correct?
Correct.
All those in favor of option C signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. Option C.
Okay, we'll proceed with that with the Planning Commission, and we'll be back here in a month or two, or probably 2 months, with the next steps. Thank you for your consideration.
All right, that concludes the historic portion of the meeting, so now we will go into the Common Design Review Board portion, where our only case today, before a couple zoning ordinance amendments, is DDR 14-2024. It's the application of Immaculate Conception Catholic Church with the agent of Lisa Meeks. Reason for the request is request for demolition of the current structure, which includes the front residential portion as well as the banquet halls and event center. The building has suffered extensive damage over the years, leaving the structure in total disrepair and an attractive nuisance. This structure is not on the National Historical Register and has no known historical significance. See attached, and the attached was the structural engineer's report, which was sent out in the packet on Friday. But this property is located at 631 Franklin Street. This is the structure at 631 Franklin. It was built around 1890. Our 2020 historic survey describes this as a 2-story brick original dwelling that became used as a Mason lodge. It has a stone foundation, side gable roof of asphalt shingles with paired brackets in the eaves, and 2 interior end brick chimneys. The facade on the south has a 1-story central entrance porch with a flat roof with dentils at the cornice and square wood columns and pilasters. To each side of the porch is a pair of arched 1/1 wood sash windows on the first and second floors. The west elevation has a porch similar to the facade porch. The rear elevation has a large addition of brick construction and a flat roof and a basement level. I will add too, some additional research. The structure was built by Mike Sullivan, who was one of the early mayors of Clarksville. Going to the air a little bit, you can see the primary structure in the addition that was mentioned. Then one shot from the side. One from the rear. And then one looking straight down on the property. I will add that the applicant has stated there's no plans for the property at this current time if it was to be demolished. Staff comments come from the Main Street guidelines. Avoid demolition of any building or portion of a building which contributes to the historic or architectural character of Clarksville. Once a building has been determined to be structurally unsound by a structural engineer, architect, or other preservation professional, the building in question may be demolished. As I mentioned, the structural engineer's report was submitted with this project and was sent out on Friday with the packet of materials. I'll read briefly from the summary. In summary, the originally constructed wood frame structure is opined to be beyond cost-effective repair. Rehabilitation of this building is not recommended. The building addition portion of the structure does have some salvage value. However, it is not of relative historic style construction that may be more of intrinsic value. and I will answer any questions of the staff if there are any.
Anybody have any questions for the staff?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Have y'all had any oppositions about this building going to be tore down or something?
So in a non-historic, just a regular common design review board case, we do not notify the public, but I have not received any public comment on this case. Yes, sir.
You said that the building was originally a Masonic Hall. Is it connected to a Masonic Lodge still in town? And do they see any value?
Not sure.
Okay.
I think to the best of my knowledge, they used that for the Knights of Columbus building for events that they had. I don't think it was used for anything else. I think they met in the basement of that, but it's kind of gotten old and they don't feel safe in there anymore. To the best of my knowledge, there could be more or something. Any other questions for the staff?
I'm sorry, you said this, but I didn't quite hear it. What are they gonna put back if they demolish it?
To my knowledge, there are no plans right now, but I'll defer to Ms. Meeks and the church.
But anything they would put back would come back before the design.
It
review
would,
board.
correct.
Any other questions? Okay, at this time, we will open the public hearing for case DDR-14-2024. Is there anyone here willing to speak in favor of it? Please come forward, state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I'm Lisa Meeks. I'm the business administrator for Immaculate Conception Church. I am 502 Latham Court is my residence. We respect the Historical Zoning Commission, and we respect the efforts to preserve the historical structures in Clarksville. I cannot and I will not take any type of actions that it's the condition of the building is not my responsibility. It happened many years ago, but it is my responsibility today to look at the liability that it does hold for our parish. It is an attractive nuisance. We have had engineers come in, we've had contractors come in, and it is beyond our ability to repair the structure. So it is a liability. We are asking for it to be demoed. We do not have any intent for the property at this time. Of course, any intentions in the future would come to this board and certainly would follow any kind of guidelines that we have for the city. At this point, based on the structural engineer's report, we do feel like it is in the best interest for us to go through with the demolition.
Any questions for Ms. Meeks? I do have one question. Is anybody still meeting in that building?
No, we've not been able to use the building. It has water damage,
Yeah.
and so it's been about 4 years since we've been able to utilize it.
And it was the Knights of Columbus that was really using it
They
before,
were.
if you will. They were the only ones really, I think.
Right, they
Yeah.
were and the Boy Scouts were, but it
Yeah.
is there, it's not where they can use it at this time.
Yes, sir.
How long has the church owned the building?
We purchased it in, I believe, 2007, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
And when we purchased it, it was already in poor condition. We've never been able to utilize the front portion, the actual structure itself. We've never been able to utilize.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Meeks?
I have a question.
Sure.
When this building was purchased, what did you all use it for as a church?
So we just used the back half, which was, in the picture, it was the Masonic Lodge
Oh, the
half.
Masonic.
And so we just used 2 meeting rooms. Our
Oh.
Knights of Columbus used that for their meeting hall.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak in favor? Please come forward. Anybody else? Is there anybody that wishes to speak in opposition to this? Please come forward, state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Dwight Eversole, and I live in Dog Hill at 410 South First Street. And I've been before this board before. I wanted to add a little context to this. I got an email from the coalition about this possible demolition, and I saw the email yesterday, and I said, well, I need to come and talk. And the reason I wanted to add a little to this was it was purchased in 2007, that is correct. And from what I understand, 2 people purchased it and donated it to church. That may not be correct. Purchased for $400,000 at that time, which was quite a bit of money. And since 2007, little to no repair has been done to this building. The tuck pointing is in excellent condition for what I can see. I'm not a structural engineer, but I've drove by for years and years and years. It had a new roof on it. So here we go from 2007 to 2024. This is another example of what we always talk about, demolition by neglect, by an owner who chooses not to repair, not to be spoke to about not repairing a property, to let it just run into the ground and then get authorization for demolition, use an excuse. Now, it is in poor condition. Now, I actually have 2017 pictures of this property because that's how involved and concerned I was about our historic downtown and the importance of this beautiful mansion and home that once belonged to Mike Sullivan. 2017, the reason I stopped was I saw all the corbels, all the big round windows from the top, all the hood ornamentation, the metal ornamentation being all removed. So in 2017, I took pictures, I was curious. So I stopped and I went in, and luckily enough, there was a preservation company out of Nashville that was in there with a sawzall that was sawzalling the staircase so they could take all the spindles because they had purchased these items because they had been contacted by someone, I guess, within the parish. I met with the maintenance supervisor at the time because he happened to be there. Lucky me. And I spoke with him, and he was very kind and nice, and we spoke at length, and he said, well, our plans are at this time is we're selling these things off because we want to demolish this front of the building, and that we're going to hire an architect, and we're to design a new front that would pay homage to the historic home. And I looked around and I said, well, if you're going to do that, why not just fix the historic home portion, which is not that large. The brick was in great condition. It had a good roof at the time. And he said, well, that's just something we don't want to do. And he said, quite frankly, the church can't afford to maintain this property. And I said, but you paid $400,000 for it. And he said, well, that's immaterial. And so I left. And I didn't see anything happen since 2017 until now. And when this came to my attention, I thought about what they always say. If somebody doesn't stand up and speak, then there's nothing to say. And if people are concerned, even if it doesn't have any impact, we should at least appear and speak to the community and say, this is how we feel. And that's how I feel. And I want to thank you for your time. If there's no questions.
Any questions for? Seeing none. Anybody else wishes to speak in opposition of this case, DDR 14-2024? Please come forward, state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is, excuse me, my name is Brenda Harper. I live at 503 Lisa Court in Montgomery County. I'm very interested to hear the comments from the previous speaker, and I think they really demonstrate one of our greatest concerns about the continued existence of historic Clarksville in any sense. That if you look at the area around there, this is sitting in an island of parking lots already, and that's what's happened to most of the other properties there, that they haven't been maintained and they haven't been saved. But one of the things that, in my view, should be done is to look at the failure to maintain and protect this property over years and not use that as an excuse to demolition, but rather see that as a requirement, a mandate for us to start changing that for the buildings that still exist, including this one. It seems there should also be an opportunity for productive reuse of this building. Perhaps that isn't something that the local church is capable of doing with their resources or their needs, but find a buyer who would be willing to maintain this building, to do some improvements to the building and find another use for it. At least that's something that should be pursued. We have heard the story or the explanation many times before about a building not being cost efficient or not being worth the effort to restore and reuse. And we also have seen subsequent owners come in and find that they can have the resources to do it and end up with a very productive, useful building that someone else was insisting had no possibility for a future, and it had to be torn down. So I'd like you to consider that there are other opportunities, and there's no reason to demolish this building just because it's been neglected by this owner and perhaps previous owners. And I believe, according to Ms. Beach and Eleanor Williams' book, the house was built in the 1850s, not the 1880s, but it was, I believe, 1856 or 57 was the original ownership of the house. And in addition to Mike Sullivan, it was the home for many years of the Gill family, and also Judge Dancy Fort and his wife, who was a daughter of the Gill family and was one of our early Clarksville suffragists. So it does have some significant historical events associated with the house. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions? For Ms. Harper? Seeing none. Is there anybody else that would wishes to speak in opposition? Please come forward, state your name, and give your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Louisa Cook, 5 Thayer Lane, Clarksville. You've seen the three of us here several times, I'm sure, lately. We represent a newly founded Montgomery County Preservation Coalition. And our goal is to preserve Clarksville's heritage, Clarksville's history. And one way to do that is visibly with structures, residences, businesses, other structures that represent where Clarksville came from and where we all, I know everybody's not from here, but you know, what makes Clarksville important? What makes it Clarksville? What makes it special? I've read in some documents that 50% of our historic buildings have been torn down in the last not too long. 50%. That doesn't leave us a whole lot to work with. So if they start going one at a time by neglect or by whatever, I'm afraid Clarksville's going to turn into just a strip mall town. And then we have a good downtown, not just downtown heritage, but in the county as well, important things that need to be saved. I didn't plan to stand up here and say this, but I just feel like it's important to know that every building is not worth saving, but many, many buildings are, and they don't all need to just come down willy-nilly. Thank you.
I have a
Any
question
questions?
for her.
Sure. She got one question for you, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who? Yes, ma'am.
Of course, me. Thank you for your input. How were you notified about this building going to be tore down? How were you notified?
Well, I have to say through my cohorts, I don't.
Through your coworker?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Anyone else wishes to speak in opposition? Normally, well, I don't know if we have a policy here. We usually limit it to 3 in the county.
Yeah, no more speakers against.
Huh?
No more speakers against.
Okay.
But there is a rebuttal.
And well, I have been informed too that we always allow for a rebuttal. So if you would like to come forward and do a rebuttal, you'll have 3 minutes.
Certainly, Immaculate Conception, we do respect and appreciate our historical buildings. We do have 2 buildings that are on the historical register, and I would love to invite anyone to come and take a look at those buildings to see the manpower and the expense that we put into those buildings to maintain those. They were built in 1880. We do not take it lightheartedly that we are having to ask to demo a building that is part of our Clarksville heritage. We're not taking it lightly. We have exhausted numerous efforts to determine what is going to be the best option and the best opportunity for us with this building. Unfortunately, based on the structural report, we have come to the conclusion our only choice at this point is to ask for demolition. We don't have the funds because right now we're looking at over $2 million at a minimum to restore this building. Right now, we're in the process of raising money to do a restoration on our chapel that was built in 1880. So for the Catholic Church to come forward and be able to invest the amount of money that it would take to preserve this or restore this structure, especially after we do have the structural engineer report that it is not recommended for it to be renovated, to be restored, we do ask for the demolition to move forward.
Any other questions for Ms. Meeks?
I have a
Yes.
question. I have a question for the codes rep. Is that possible?
I got a question for Ms. Meeks
No,
first.
I don't-
Yes.
okay.
If this is approved, would the church be willing to put up a signage like we did at the other, at the
First
Baptist church to say the historical importance of that building and its everything that it's been?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And may I also note that when the St. John Missionary Church was demoed behind us, the new owner would not allow for that marker to be placed on that property. So our church did allow a marker to be placed at the corner of our property, marking the historical significance of the Missionary Baptist Church that was torn down there. So yes, we would.
Thank you. You have a question for Chris?
Yeah.
Hi, Board. Chris Williams, City of Clarksville Building Codes Representative.
What's the process from codes when a building gets in this, I mean, at what point does code step in and start citing the owner or acknowledging or, you know, sending something to them saying, hey, look, this building is, you know, going into neglect, it's gonna need some work, or where's codes at in that? Because you're the one that is the enforcer on this, correct? Codes
Yes.
Department?
Yes.
Because, I mean, I think this is part of that discussion. I mean, we've got these buildings going down to neglect, and it's codes, it's in codes preview or purview to kind of maybe stop that, or maybe, you know, get it before it gets to that point. And I'm just wondering what the process is.
There is a guideline in the codes that it's 50% to value.
Okay.
That's what we kind of go by. Sometimes, you know, you can't go by that.
Sure.
I've been dealing with this probably for the last 5 years on this property. I've been in it. We also keep in mind that anything can be remodeled.
Sure.
It's
just
if
how much
the
it's gonna
funds
cost.
are available.
Understand.
I would like to ask Ms. Meeks just one question for my reference. Is the cost occurred by just the Catholic Church here in Clarksville? I knew y'all had to have bishop approval to tear this down. Does any of the costs come from the Catholic Church?
It comes from our parish.
Okay, okay.
That answered my question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
I do have- So when someone has a historic structure and starts to tear off things like the window hoods and ornamentation, at what point does that constitute demolition versus just they're doing maintenance? And at what point do you have to have a permit for demolition?
I don't think I follow your question. So
I mean, you know, we're taking off,
inside.
from what we've heard anecdotally.
Inside.
Well, no, outside too, because when you look at the photo, the metal hoods over the windows look a lot like the ones at Archwood, at Austin P. When those were removed, I mean, that's removing a historical, you know, something, because you can kind of see where the brick is lighter above the windows. At what point is that demolition versus maintenance?
With all due respect, we have another property on Madison Street that has gone in front of this board and got denied for demolition. I'm not, as a city employee, I'm not going to answer that question with all due respect,
Okay.
because that is in litigation.
All right, that was before my time on the board,
Okay.
so maybe
So I don't want to answer that question, sir.
okay, thank you.
If that's okay, I'm
That's
sorry.
fine. No.
Any other questions for Chris? Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Anybody have any other questions or anything for the staff or anything? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
We have
At this time, we will close the public hearing. Does anybody else have any
I
questions?
got a
or
question.
anything? Yes, ma'am.
Don't we supposed to have a rebuttal from both sides, and if she gave her rebuttal, then the other side is supposed to have rebuttal?
Planning Commission, we've typically not done sir rebuttals, but that's just been our policy in the past.
But how is that fair? If you give one side a rebuttal opportunity, then you ought to give the other side a rebuttal opportunity, because that's how the Robert Rules of Order works.
I can't speak to Robert's rules, but it's been our position that the request is coming from a specific applicant who has to go first and then gets questions by a group of people who may come against it. and they should have the opportunity to answer it. They did not introduce any other additional information, I believe, that anyone can then further rebut. But, I mean, we can have a Robert's Rules class at another time, but that's been policy since before I got here, about one rebuttal when someone's speaking.
Maybe that's the way you all do it. No disrespect or anything. Just want to make sure the people get the fair share of being able to speak up for what they want. Okay?
Understand?
Thank you.
Any other questions for the staff? If not, I will entertain a motion. Whatever it may be. Vote, make a motion to not do it, make a motion to do it and vote it down, or make a motion to do it and vote it up. We have to have a motion.
Or defer for additional.
Or we can defer.
But for a reason.
A motion.
I do have an additional question for the staff.
But it's-
Sure, go ahead.
I know in the past, prior to when I was on this time, when we don't take an action on demolition, it's only lasts a certain amount of time. Is that still in? I think that was a historic overlay question.
Yeah, I don't think there's any time, sunset on any action or no action here. Your options right now, as I see it, would be to approve it, disapprove it, defer it for a period of time for additional information, but be very specific about what you want. You did get an engineer's report, or approve or deny with other conditions.
I have something to say before I make a motion. I know that Ms. Meeks spoke and she said that it will cost about $2 million to restore this building at a minimum, okay? Thank you. And I'm just wondering, I know the Montgomery County Perseverance Historical Committee, I was just wondering, would they have any money to help to restore it? Since they do not want it tore down, would they have any way to assist the church in getting money to help to restore this building if they didn't want it tore down? Can anybody answer that for me, please?
You're referring to the Preservation Coalition.
Yeah, you are.
We have no money.
Okay. And so, okay, all right, that answers me. So I'm gonna make a motion for demolition.
Motion's been made with the putting up a monument. Will you accept that as there as well?
Mm-hmm.
That we talked about
Yeah,
before?
that'd be good.
Yeah.
We add that too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So a motion's been made to accept the demolition with the monument to go on the, on its historical part. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Chair's in doubt.
So now,
We're gonna need a hand vote, please.
Yeah, hand vote.
Yeah.
All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Yeah.
Three, all, four.
all in favor?
In favor.
Okay.
All those in
Raise your
favor,
hand.
raise your hand
For demolition.
for demolition.
In favor of demolition, I have 3.
All those, thank you. All those opposed? The motion is
5,
denied.
6.
With the nine.
Thank you.
So what we got?
Okay. If you flip over to the other side of your agenda, we've already done the downtown historical overlay, which is A, as well as public comments underneath. This time we'll turn it over. We have B and C, and then we'll go into attorney-client privilege after that, but I'll turn it over to
Thank you.
Mr. Tyndall.
Thank you, Chairman. Before you today,
This
and this is sort of that process we talked earlier about. We started the downtown or the historic overlay, then we bring it back. This goes back to about December of last year. Remember, the Immaculate Conception had the church that was requesting a reader sign. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing the wrong one first. Been a Monday. Okay. I'll do this one first. We got the map up. So the first request, this goes back all the way to December of 2019. And City Council passed a resolution. So Councilmember Smith, to your point, that is another way to get a zoning change, is to have City Council pass a resolution to ask the Planning Commission Director and staff to perform a study and create whatever it is. And at the time, it was for the creation of a design overlay district for State Route 76, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway. We all know what happened right after December 2019. And this really went on the shelf. In fact, Brent and I had a stack of letters, a stack of envelopes. We had everything ready to start going out and notifying the public and hold some meetings. And it just went on the shelf. And then for about 2 years, we didn't really do any public meetings. Well, with our, we're about to go under contract this week to redo all the city and county ordinances for zoning. And as a caveat, I will tell you, to what we've seen today, we are definitely going to focus on how to strengthen demolition by neglect, because I think it is such a gray area that even our code department can't answer what is or isn't demolition, that we're going to have to touch that up. So I'll just put that advertisement there. But we need to finish off any other loose ends before we get into this zoning ordinance. So this is one that was initiated, and rather than create a new design overlay just for 76 out there, the connector, we felt, Brent and I, in meeting with our staff here, that it was the best to just extend the Madison Street Highway and Residential District up that corridor. So all the properties in blue, as you see on this map, are existing Madison Street Highway District properties. Everything in orange is a proposed MLK Highway 76 connector highway district, so the same rules that apply in Madison Street, and then in yellow is residential districts. I'll remind everyone that if it is a single family or a duplex, that these rules do not apply to any single family or duplexes. We did hold a public workshop on August 22nd at the Crow Rec Center. We had probably between 30 and 40 individuals show up over the hour, more than I thought. A lot of residents, but we wanted to hear from the residents. A lot of it was answering, what can I do, what can't I do with my property, and then pretty much when we left, I don't think anyone was necessarily against it. There was a lot of head nodding and understanding where we were coming from. Again, we have sent a letter to everyone who is in orange and yellow on this map. And here's the rules as follows. So what you're looking at in front of you on this sheet, it says an ordinance amending the city of ordinances of the city of Clarksville, Tennessee, extending the Madison Street corridor. So first thing is to correct throughout the entire chapter 9. It's just an opportunity to do some house cleaning. 3 or 4 different terms for the Madison Street corridor. It'll called Madison Street Design Overlay, Madison Street Corridor Design Overlay, Madison Overlay. We're cleaning it up to just be called one thing throughout. So that's just that first opportunity to do some house cleaning while we're correcting the ordinance. If you flip to the next page, we are adding picture 9.2, which is very similar to what you see above there. And that picture establishes the overlay district to all those properties that are highlighted that front on the frontage of Highway 76 up to the interstate. Then on page 2, you'll see, or the next page, page 3, the sub-districts. So you'll see where it's labeled highway, residential, residential, highway, just calling out the sub-district. There is a chart in your ordinance that talks about what the sub-districts are. And in the highway and residential sub-district, it does not change the base zoning. So the setbacks, the height, the parking requirements are all the same. Just for instance, in the Hilldale sub-area or the historic Madison Street area, there are some differences between the base zoning or the setbacks or the parking and the landscaping and it. This area adheres to the base zoning, so this really comes into changing the height of the signs, the type of sign that you can use, preferably with a dark background, and the high quality materials to be used on new construction or remodeling. It does not alter landscaping, it does not alter parking, it does not alter the use of the property. The Planning Commission will get this tomorrow for consideration to bring to the City Council. But this is your opportunity to ask questions, and the Common Design Review Board has the opportunity to endorse or not endorse this to the Planning Commission. I will tell you staff's position on this right now is to not adopt it, that it is almost at a point of mootness out there due to the amount of growth that's been out there in the last 5 to 10 years, and that most of the new construction, with the exception of some of the signage, already would meet the design overlay. So you can kind of take that one way or another. At this time, we can have a public hearing on this here, just for any comments, Chairman. I'll be happy to answer any comments from the board, and then we'll look for either an endorsement or not from this board to the Planning Commission for this ordinance, and then I'll go over the LED sign one next.
Is there any questions for the staff? Any questions for the staff?
I have one simple one. What is this intersection right here?
That is the intersection of Martin Luther King and Madison Street.
Got it. Okay. Just trying to get,
So the
Where I am.
staff recommends not.
We do not recommend adopting it at this time.
Endorsing it.
Why?
For two reasons. One would be that it would further stretch the city code department and the planning staff to have to administer design review amongst these additional 130 properties, I think, give or take. And that, again, to the point of mootness, that for the most part, save about 5 or 6 large parcels, it has all been developed out under pretty high quality standards already.
Any other questions for the staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to speak in favor of this ordinance? Please come forward, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes. Anybody in favor? Is there anybody in opposition to this ordinance? Please come forward and state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Anybody in opposition? Seeing none. Any other questions for staff or anybody here? If not, I'll entertain a motion, whether we to endorse or not.
I have one question
Sure.
before we do. Mr. Tender, what is the main thing in this ordinance that, would this help them to have the LED lights, but with restrictions?
We'll go over the LED signs next. We're
Yeah.
just doing the map and the MLK overlay at this time.
Oh, okay, all right.
We'll do a separate vote on that one.
So to not endorse,
Do we just-
motion, or
So-
do we just say
Yeah.
nothing?
Just disapproval
motion.
or what?
You can make a motion for disapproval or, yeah.
I make a motion for disapproval.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Did you get?
It failed.
Mr. Smith, okay.
The next
All right.
ordinance.
Thank you, Board. The next ordinance follows out of this most recent December, where the Immaculate Conception Church brought up the idea of doing an electronic reader board in front of the school. I believe you all tabled it at the moment, but asked for some further clarification. So we've been working on and off throughout the last couple months. We did a little bit of a study. We've looked at what our similar cities do here in Tennessee, but we've quickly discovered that in Clarksville, we have almost zero regulations on LED signage throughout the entire city and county. So we felt this was an opportunity to sort of give with one hand and maybe take it with the other a little bit. But by putting some reasonable guidelines citywide on LED reader boards, but at the same time allowing them within reason within the Madison Street overlay districts. And I'll go through this a little bit. First of all, we had to define digital message board there. And then the rest of it is under Chapter 8, which involves signage and lighting now, and I'll go over that at the end. We just updated the first paragraph of the section to include to avoid visual clutter and distracted driving. That was not included in the original intent of the signage ordinance. If you go to page 2, and this got bounced off of what we call our Land Development Advisory Committee last week, which is 2 city council members, 2 county commissioners, and 3 folks who are in the building or real estate professions. They were talking about non-commercial messages. So get out and vote, God save the troops, those kind of messages. So we kind of strengthened the language that there's already an exemption for holiday decorations and with no commercial messages, and we've updated that to say holiday signs and decorations and signs with no commercial messages are exempt from the following rules. So just to clarify that, you can do that. You can hang those Jesus signs around town and other signs that don't have a commercial message. In talking with the code department, because anytime we do something like this, we always get the code director and his folks involved. They wanted us to also look at the development directory signs. So this is when you have a multi-tenant strip center, it'll have a little bit of a board for every person. That's not a requirement of a strip center, but they don't want every strip center to have, say, 5 monument signs in front of it. You want to have one sign that has everyone on it. So we clarified that here, that a multi-tenant building, which is what a strip center is, shall use a development directory sign. And if there's another use on site that is not part of the strip mall, say there's another outbuilding that does its thing, it gets its own sign, but the strip center has to have the multi-tenant built sign.
Anchor tenant or something, or does it have to be a separate?
For instance, if I had a strip center with 4 uses in it, but then maybe I had a building over here that did stonework. That building, it was all in one parcel. It could have its own sign, and then the strip mall has its own sign.
Standalone building.
Correct, standalone use or standalone building. So then we get into the meat of this section where it says, add to 8.2, number 25, digital message board requirements. So this starts the citywide regulation of digital message boards. First of all, that digital message boards on pylon signs shall not exceed 50% of the maximum signage area. In other words, your digital reader boards shouldn't be your entire sign. There should be other signage around it, the name of the business, the address, the phone number, whatever it is. It should not be the main portion of the total sign area. Digital message boards for development signs, which we just discussed, can be 25% of it, thereby leaving the other 75% for all the businesses in the strip center. They could obviously share the LED sign on top if they wanted to. These regulations would go into effect January 1st, 2025. We felt that was an adequate time to get the word out. This would not be adopted by City Council until November at the rate of meetings right now. They would consider it in November for second reading if it goes through. And then that gives all of November, all of December. We will work with the code department on getting an ad campaign or a flyer out there so that businesses can understand some of the new rules. I encourage any of you, if you don't know what we're talking about, to just drive up the 41A bypass by Vista Lane to downtown. There's about 7 of these signs that none are really in compliance if you look at what they do. Very flashing, animated, and we'll get on that in a second. So really on letter D, I through X, or 1 through 10 there, are the real meat of the subject here. Digital reader boards are only permitted on non-residential used properties, so no houses, no duplexes, no apartment buildings. Only 1 freestanding digital sign per property. If you have a secondary frontage, you can go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and request a second one on the other road, but you're limited to just 1 per property. Then we get into the bigger stuff. Any message must be displayed a minimum of 12 seconds. I have timed some signs in our town as little as 2 seconds between messages. Just click, click, next image, next words, and it goes on and on. That's very distracting. If you look at some of the standards out there, the least I've seen is around 8 seconds. The most I've seen is 30 seconds to 60 seconds in some more restrictive towns. So I feel 12 seconds allows for 5 images a minute. 10 seconds would be 6 images a minute for the motoring public. There is also a more complicated way to do this, and I did not want to make it harder on the code department, but it deals with speed limit, how far away you can see the sign, and you do a math calculation for how many times it should be seen before someone gets by the sign. I did not want to have them have to do math on every one of these signs. The transition time between images and messages should be instantaneous. We see a lot of it, that it scrolls in from the side, it fades in, it'll appear. Right, so it should be instantaneous. I would say instantaneous would be less than a second. The image or text shall be static. This is another big one you'll see in the community. No movies, no GIFs, no moving images. Even the American, you'll see the ones with the American flag flying, or snow falling, or leaves falling. Again, drive down the bypass, you'll see every example of this. Again, you're not getting the message across. You're trying to distract and get eyes on target, if you will. It may sound silly, but we also said no audio is permitted. It's just good housekeeping to put it in there now before it becomes an issue. It seems like other communities are actually seeing this now, where signs are now playing music or other audio as they're not signs anymore. No chasing, sequential, or running messages. In other words, you can't say coming, this, and then the next sign will say Saturday at, and it'll say 12 o'clock, open house, you know. It all has to be one message at a time. You can't keep the reader of the board attracted to your sign to just see what the next word is, what the next word is. It has to be one idea at a time. All digital signs shall use automatic dimming. This is another big initiative. When we started this, we heard a lot about how bright they are at night or in the rain. All of these newer signs should have automatic dimming. They just need to be turned on. And I'm not always sure that the people programming it know it's on there even. You can either do it through a timer or a sensor. Kind of like my house at night, some outside lights turn on. You could have one that turns these signs down to a more acceptable brightness. The way you measure that, there's a more scientific way, but it would have required the code department to buy a $3,000 camera. So this can be just done with a light candle meter like a photographer would have. So like $40 piece of equipment, and you just hold it up toward the sign and you measure that versus the ambient light, and it should be at 0.3 foot candles above it. Anything above that starts to get brighter on people. And then another piece of housekeeping: if the sign is off or malfunctioning, it shall display a solid background. And also talking with the code department, we've noticed recently, and this really goes to smoke shops and vape shops, one of the popular things to do is to shine the lights from the building out into the road. So the code department asked us, what can you do about lighting? So first we looked at city code. There is nothing in city code that talks about lighting except just being a nuisance. And that kind of gets into that gray area of a nuisance to someone may not be a nuisance to someone else. So we added that lighting shall be directed downward, and I will make a point that we took out the to include shielded hoods. It just needs to be directed downward and shall not cast light pollution on adjacent properties. In no instances shall lighting, whether that's parking, advertising, or security lighting, be projected directly into the public right away. The code department feels that wording is strong enough for them to go to these. All they have to do is knock on the door and say, hey, next 30 days, get up there, turn that light down. We added in 8.6, just to be clear, that in the historical districts, digital reader boards are prohibited. And then here's the guidelines that would apply to the Madison Street District. A portion of one freestanding sign per property may contain a digital reader board not to exceed 50% of the total sign area, but no more than 25 square feet. So in some instances, you can actually have up to 100 square feet of sign, but we did not feel a 50 square foot reader board would be appropriate. So typically, a small sign on Madison Street will be 50 square feet, so 25 feet of that 50 square feet can be reader board. And the sign cannot be exclusively reader board, as we said before. It has to have some other business sign on there. And then if you're using a monument sign, which is there under section 942, a portion of one monument sign may contain a digital reader board not to exceed 20 square feet. The total square footage of a monument sign is 30 square feet. So it's a little more than half, but it's a much smaller sign. So again, we feel this is a great middle ground. It's a great opportunity to put some guidelines citywide on something that's becoming more and more of an issue that we've heard, as well as the code department, but as well let Madison Street kind of comply with what some of the government buildings and school buildings and others have done or have been grandfathered. There's been several grandfathered digital signs on Madison Street over the years as well. I'll take any questions and we can get any public input.
Any questions for Mr. Tindall? Doug?
Well, first, I want to congratulate you. This is, I think, wonderful, and I wholeheartedly endorse these. I really appreciate what you and the staff have done on them. Lighting properties, that's fantastic. That is only in the city limits?
Currently, this is a city ordinance only.
I'll endorse whatever we can do to get that in the county as well. Under the 8.6 historic districts, is that just with properties with H1 overlay, or does that include the downtown design review districts?
So that is for historic H1 properties only.
Oh, okay.
In the design district, I do believe it says LED is not permitted at this time, but we wanted to make sure that the historic district, it was clearly stated that this is not permitted either.
So the district's denial of LED supersedes what this is?
It could. You could interpret that way. I like having it in there more than once, though.
Okay, thank you.
If there is a business
Okay.
and it has a light projecting that business name down on the street on, I'll just say Franklin Street.
Yep.
It's not 107, I promise you. Is that legal or illegal at this time?
At this time, I don't believe there's any rule.
There's not a rule saying.
Guiding that.
Okay.
I believe that when we have said, in no instance shall lighting, whether that's parking, advertising, or security lighting, be projected directly into the public right-of-way, would cover that in the
So
future.
now there's nothing but that's proposed that there will be.
Yes.
Okay.
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Tenzel, I may have seen a little off earlier because these two papers here, I thought they were the same. They have the same ordinance numbers on them. You don't have an exact, you got ordinance 2024, 2025 on both of these, so I'm thinking this one
I
thing,
understand.
I didn't see this until
Yeah.
now.
Ordinance numbers haven't been assigned yet because it hasn't been
I know you
sent
don't
to
have, no,
Lisa
you
yet.
have the same year on these ordinance, not an ordinance number, but you have the
Mm-hmm.
same, you have ordinance dash with these little things, you don't have a Pacific, but you do have the same years on both of these papers. So that confused me, thinking that we only had one ordinance today, okay? And I didn't see this one until now, okay? So that's why I was confused as to what you're talking about. Far as the highway versus the LEDs. I kept going to the LEDs because that's the only thing I had. I just found this one, okay? They have the same number, okay? But my question to you, thank you for explaining in good detail. That will cut down on my questions. I know that you said that this is for the H1 district. Would this affect any businesses in the homes, like a beautician who may have a sign in her yard in this district? How would it affect them, or would it?
So currently in the city, home-based businesses cannot have signs.
What?
Yep. So,
I used to have one in my yard.
that doesn't mean it's right. But
Wow.
I'm looking for my code. He's
No,
left already
it
for the
wasn't
day. but
illegal. It wasn't illegal then.
That's very possible. But yeah,
Was it?
home-based businesses are not permitted a sign right now.
Wow, we got to allow them to have a sign in their yards.
That is
That's
something.
gonna hurt
So
us.
when we do our code rewrite, not to go back to that, we are going to look at the home-based businesses, what is permitted, try to make it actually easier on them. It's a very difficult process to get a home-based business. You have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and answer some questions to them. So we'd rather make that just go get the permit and just go on your way. But we are going to look at, is maybe a 2-foot by 2-foot sign appropriate if it's, but we would not want LED signs in the community.
Not a LED sign, just a
Yes,
regular sign is
correct.
what
So
I'm
nothing of this touches that.
It won't? Okay. Now, I did have a home sign in my yard, and I had my business open. And, also, I had another question about, well, I can't think of it right now. I'm not gonna waste any time, but like I said, thank you. You did a good job in detailing this.
Oh, and so would this apply to existing LED signs that are
As of
non-conforming?
January 1st.
Okay.
And we can change that date, the city council may choose to amend that date to a little later date. That does give us 2 months to get the word out. Our view on that is, as soon as that sign changes, it becomes a new sign. So there's an opportunity in the future to say, now you've got to comply.
I know.
Yeah.
I know what I was gonna ask. Anybody else got?
Go ahead.
You
I've
go
got a
ahead.
question.
No, you go
No,
ahead.
go
I'm
ahead, go
already-
ahead. Finish up.
You sure?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, ladies first. Thank you. The size, no, that's not what it was. Oh, see, you made me, you said there will be only one message at a time.
Yes.
Okay. So does that mean all day, or is that every 12 seconds?
Every 12 seconds.
Oh, every 12 seconds, okay.
Now, some may choose to leave a photo up all day. In fact, I went by a bank today and it didn't change in the minute I was sitting at the light. Other businesses have, I'll say, abused this, and it's every 3 and 4 seconds.
Oh, well,
So,
Okay.
12 seconds would be the change between images or words.
Okay, right.
But we're not telling them what they can or can't say, just that it can be every 12 seconds.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about, there's a lot of clutter on the signs with all these different signage for different properties, and in the community I was in before, they limited it based on the square footage of the property, of the frontage of the property. Is there any thought to doing something like that to limit the size of signs?
So I will say, this is this is strictly for the LEDs
Yeah,
right now.
that's okay.
And as we go through our code rewrite,
Yep.
we're doing the whole code. We're not
Okay.
just doing the zones, we're not just doing the parking, everything's on the table, including the signage. So I definitely think something like that, if that's the way the community and the planning commission wants to go, we could look at the size of the building or the
Yep.
size of the property for the size of your sign.
Yep.
But
Th-
that,
this is-
this does not do that at that time.
This is excellent, though, thank you. So,
Does this apply to outdoor advertising, electronic billboards?
Does not apply to billboards, but I believe they have to apply to different standards for the highway administration, so.
David?
I think it's a great start. I think there's one flaw in it.
What is?
Who's gonna take care of it? Who's gonna enforce it?
That would fall under the
Building
code department.
code.
That's your issue. I mean, we're talking about, nothing against the codes department, but are you gonna have someone staffed? Are you gonna be in another position? I think we need to defer this and have the codes director here so he can answer these questions, because if you're gonna give this to codes and say, you're gonna mount to these signs, once the signs are up, they're gonna do what they wanna do. And if codes doesn't monitor it, it's gonna be,
Out in the air.
it's gonna be wide open.
Just, we have involved the code department, Mr. Justin Crosby at this time. He's been involved, he sees it, he likes it. I will say they have currently 5 code enforcers for the entire city. They did
Right.
ask for some more this past year, but did not get them in their budget. But this would fall under
Code
enforcement, yes.
Any other questions? Okay,
Public comment.
we'll open it for a public hearing. Is there anybody that wishes to speak in favor of the digital read boards? Please come forward, state your name and your address. Anybody in favor? Seeing none, would anybody like to speak in opposition? Please come forward. Anybody in opposition? We will now close that public hearing. Do we have any other questions or a motion?
Make a motion to the back.
Whatever we're doing with them.
Approval.
We approve it to
Second.
go to the.
Motion's been made to approve and properly seconded. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It carries.
Opposed. You got,
Alright.
you got opposers. Did you get the opposers?
He got it?
Okay.
Got
You did.
8, 4, 1 against? Is that what I got?
It's
Okay.
2 against.
2 against.
Me.
Okay, you, I got it. 7, 4, 2 against.
Okay, at this time, we need to move into attorney-client privilege. So if anybody that's here that's not, we ask that you leave. From Wanda down, you guys can be.
This is this historic matter that we're
Historic.
discussing, so common design review members, you are dismissed for the day. Thank you.
Is that me? Jeff?
If you're on the,
You got to stay.
You on the historic-
if you're on the Historic Zoning Commission, you said.
I'm